Hello, everybody. My name is Adonai Berhe, and I'm a computer engineering student at the University of Idaho. And this is my presentation about computers. So, before we talk about anything about computers, it's very important to talk about the historical backgrounds of computers. So, the computers that we have in nowadays is not the computers that we used to have in the beginning. So, we had several generations that we progressed through in order to get to what we have right now. So when we look at the first generation of computers, first generations of computers were huge. They were the size of a building, not exaggerating actually. So they used these things called magnetic drums for memory, and then they used vacuum tubes in as a circuitry. So as you can see, the things that are the huge little tube wire things that are protruding from these giant server-looking computers are actually what they used to use for transmitting signal from one part of the computer to the next. And then the language that people had to use in order to program or communicate with these computers were machine language for the most part. And these computers were very inefficient. There was a lot of heat loss, and at the same time, it made a lot of noise. And thus, not a lot of people, well, actually, no one could afford it in terms of having one in your house. But in addition to that, not a lot of people even knew how to use it because of the low levelness of the language. And then the second generation of computers we have, they use transistors in place of the vacuum tubes, which reduced a lot of heat and made the system a lot more efficient. But at the same time, they use assembly language and languages by the name COBOL and Fortran in order to communicate from within the computer. We no longer use COBOL and Fortran for the most part, but we still do use assembly and we still do use machine language at some level as well, even now. And then they use punch cards in order to communicate as an input and output device to and from the computer. And then going about 60, 70 years ahead of what we talked about earlier, the modern day computers. So the modern day computers, so the computers that we were talking about earlier, they can only process one task at a time. So nowadays we have computers that are like quad core, 5 cores, and multiple cores basically. So these processors can execute multiple instructions at the same time. In addition to that, most of the computers nowadays are trying to integrate artificial intelligence, voice recognition, and thumb recognition as well into the core of the actual computer. So nowadays, if you see most of iPhones and even Android phones, they use the thumb to recognize the user. So this is one of the advancements that we've made 5 generations after the first computer that was invented. And then we use high level languages that are a lot closer to human languages versus the machine languages and assembly language that we were using in order to program these computers. So the end goal of computers is to at some point be able to communicate with computers using natural language or human language. So essentially, we'd be able to tell the computer what to do, and the computer would recognize, understand, interpret, and execute the commands that we tell it by processing it within, and we wouldn't have to learn any of these programming languages. But until that day comes, we still have to learn Java and C++. And then the circuitry has been integrated and has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller to got to a point where now we use VLSI, which is stands for Very Large Scale Integrated Circuits. So these are in nanometers. They're so tiny that the naked eye cannot even see them. And we use tiny, tiny transistors and lots of circuit elements in order to build up this circuitry. And then in terms of memory, the memory capacity that we have right now is amazing. So we have hard drives that are in terabytes, and these new technology solid state drives, which no longer uses a rotating magnet, but actually a standing drive that is a lot more efficient, a lot more faster than the hard drives that we used a couple of years ago. So as we can see, technology is advancing and computers are getting faster, smaller, and a lot better and a lot more powerful. And then finally, we can talk about how a computer actually works. So in order to break down a computer, there are basically four big parts. You have the input, which can be either a keyboard, a touch screen, and mouse. A scanner, anything that basically a human or another computer can use in order to send information into the computer. And then the next part is the processor. The processor is the brain of the computer that basically obtains information, analyzes, interprets it, and then changes it into an executable output. And then the information that the processor learns is stored into memory. And then the memory can be either a temporary memory or a permanent memory, as depicted in the image. And then once everything is stored and everything is processed, an output signal is being sent out. And these output devices can be, the monitors in our screens, the printer, a speaker, anything basically that we can receive information from a computer is intentionally considered as an output. So with these four basic components, we are able to send in information and be able to do a lot more things with our computers, with our phones, with our processors, and then also get amazing results. Thank you very much, and that was all I had to do. Thank you.